You may never have heard of Victorian crawlers, but what you're about to hear is an eye-opening account of the most desperately poor people of 19th century London. These forgotten souls huddled on workhouse steps, begged from beggars themselves, and endured unimaginable hardship that will make you shudder. Here's what life was really like for the crawlers of Victorian London. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I always wonder where everyone's at, so comment your city and what time it is. Weird to think some of you are having breakfast in London while I'm recording this at night here in the States. Alright, we're heading to Victorian London in a minute. But first though, get comfortable. Seriously, take a second. Adjust whatever needs adjusting. You're not going to want to move once we start. Your eyes open to darkness. Your back is screaming from the hard stone beneath you. Not a gentle kind of pain, but the deep, grinding ache that comes from sleeping on cold workhouse steps for weeks on end. Welcome to your life as a crawler of St. Giles. The woman next to you shifts slightly. She's old, or at least looks it. Hard to tell actual age when poverty has weathered someone's face like a cliff facing the sea. You're both huddled together, not from affection, but from the desperate need for warmth that comes with having no shelter but the doorway of a London workhouse. Unlike your warm bed right now, where you can stretch out freely, you haven't been able to lie down properly for days. You sleep sitting up, head reclining against the workhouse door, a position that brings no true rest, only a strange half-consciousness, a constant dozing that never quite becomes actual sleep. "Can't feel my feet anymore," mutters the woman beside you, her voice barely audible over the distant sounds of carts beginning to move in the early morning streets. "Better that way," you reply. "Mine hurt too much when I can feel 'em." You know the nickname they've given your kind, dosses. It comes from this perpetual dozing state. Even now as we're talking, your eyelids feel like they weigh 50 pounds each, but you're never fully asleep. There's a part of you that always stays alert, even with your eyes closed. One wrong move, one unguarded moment, and what little you have might be taken. The dawn light is starting to creep into the streets of St. Giles, and with it comes your first decision of the day. Your stomach is empty, not the kind of hungry you feel when dinner's running late, but the hollow, painful emptiness that comes from days of inadequate food. You need tea. The warm liquid won't fill you, but it'll chase away the chill that's settled deep in your bones from another night exposed to London's damp air. The woman next to you, Mary, you think her name is, though names matter little in this world, has a broken teapot. No handle, no spout, but it holds liquid, and that's enough. Between the five of you who regularly share these steps, you've managed to collect some used tea leaves from a nearby house. The servants there sometimes take pity. "Think we might get a penny today?" asks Mary, her voice carrying a hope her eyes don't share. "Maybe," you say, though neither of you believes it. A penny. That's all it would take to buy fresh tea leaves instead of the used ones you've collected. 1 penny for a moment of comfort that people with homes wouldn't even think twice about. You glance down at the child sleeping against your side. She's not yours. She belongs to Sarah, who works at a coffee shop several streets over. Sarah leaves her here with you during her shifts, and the arrangement works for everyone. The child gets someone to watch her, Sarah can work, and you... well, you get a small bit of human connection, plus the body heat of a small person pressed against you. "She's pushing her head under my chin when it's very cold," you explain to a passing woman who looks at you curiously, "cuddles up to me so that it keeps me warm as well as itself." The child coughs, a wet, concerning sound that speaks of cold and damp and not enough food. But you've heard worse. At least she's alive, which is more than can be said for plenty of children born to your circumstances. It's time to start the day's ritual. Someone needs to go to Drury Lane, where there's a coffee shop keeper who takes pity and gives free boiling water. Without that small charity, there would be no tea, no warmth in your belly to start the day. "I'll go," offers an elderly woman who's just waking up on the step below yours. Her name is Elizabeth, and she's been a crawler longer than anyone else in your group. The lines on her face tell a story of decades of hardship, but there's still a stubbornness in her eyes. "Your legs giving you trouble again," you observe. It's not a question. "Always do in the damp," she replies, struggling to stand. "But sitting here won't make 'em better." You watch as she slowly rises, each movement clearly causing pain. The way she winces reminds you that crawling isn't just a nickname. It's often literally how you move when your body is broken down by exposure and malnutrition. She doesn't actually crawl today, but a shuffling, hunched gait isn't far from it. "Take the kid with you," Mary suggests. "People more likely to help when they see a child." Elizabeth nods, gently rousing the little girl. "Come on, little one, let's go fetch the hot water." The child whimpers but stands obediently. Even at her young age, she knows the rules of survival. Stay close, do as told, don't make noise that might attract the wrong kind of attention. As they depart, you stretch your stiff limbs as much as the cramped space allows. Every joint protests. You're not old, probably somewhere in your 30s, though it's been years since you've seen your reflection clearly enough to really know how you look, but your body feels ancient. "Constable Burke is on today," notes a man who's just arrived at the steps. He's not a crawler, he's a proper beggar with a regular spot near the church, which practically makes him aristocracy compared to you. But he sometimes brings news, or, if he's done well, a crust of bread to share. "Burke's not bad," Mary says. "Doesn't chase us off at least. Unless the superintendent comes by," you add. "Then he has to put on a show." The beggar nods. "Rain coming later," he says. "Going to be a bad one." This news sits heavy between you. Rain means getting soaked through. It means the ague that follows, the shivering that seems to reach your very soul. It means the steps become slippery and even more dangerous. But there's nowhere else to go. "I miss walls," you say suddenly, surprising yourself with the admission. "Real walls. A roof." Mary gives you a sidelong glance. "Don't start with that. No use thinking about what we don't have." She's right, of course. Dwelling on former comforts only makes the present harder to bear. But sometimes the memories slip out anyway. A warm fire, a proper bed, food that wasn't scavenged or begged for. For Mary, it's been 3 years on these steps. For you, just over 1. Your story isn't unusual among the crawlers. You worked as a seamstress before your eyes started failing. Without sight good enough for fine stitching, you lost your position. Without a position, you couldn't pay rent. Without a place to live, you couldn't find new work. One misfortune led to another until here you are, part of the invisible population that London steps around or over but rarely sees. "I heard Martha got work," the beggar offers, breaking into your thoughts. "Cleaning floors at some gentleman's house in Mayfair." The news travels through the small group like an electric current. Work, real work. It happens occasionally. One of you escapes the steps. But it's rare enough to be remarkable. "How'd she manage that?" you ask, unable to keep the urgency from your voice. He shrugs. "Got herself cleaned up somehow, found someone to vouch for her." And there's the rub. Getting cleaned up requires resources you don't have. Getting a reference requires knowing people who still respect you enough to put their own reputation on the line. It's a puzzle where all the pieces are just out of reach. The beggar moves on after sharing his news, heading to his spot before someone else claims it. The hierarchy of London's streets is strict and unforgiving. Beggars look down on crawlers, shop owners chase away beggars, the police move everyone along when complaints come in. And at the bottom are you and your companions, too weak even to beg properly, reduced to accepting charity from those only slightly better off. Elizabeth returns with the child and the precious hot water. The tea is made, weak, reused leaves producing something that barely deserves the name, but it's hot and it has the memory of flavour. The broken teapot is passed around carefully, each of you taking a small sip before passing it to the next. There's an unspoken etiquette even here, at rock bottom. Sarah will be by at 4 to get her, Elizabeth says, nodding at the child who's curled up again, already halfway to that same dozing state that characterises all of you. The tea is gone too quickly, leaving behind only the ghost of warmth in your stomach. It's not enough. It's never enough, but it's something. You think of your young life before these steps. The memories feel distant, like they belong to someone else. You've tried to keep your pride. That's one thing the steps haven't yet taken from you. But pride is a luxury when survival is at stake. You've seen others refuse help because it came with conditions they found demeaning. Most of them aren't around anymore. The rain the beggar predicted arrives earlier than expected, a sudden downpour that sends people on the streets scurrying for cover. There is no cover for you except the slight overhang of the workhouse door, and that only helps if the wind isn't blowing the rain sideways, which it often does. "Under the door!" Mary commands, pulling the child closer to the scant protection of the workhouse entrance. You all press together, a huddled mass of damp humanity seeking whatever shelter you can find. Within minutes, you're soaked through. Your clothes, the same ones you've worn for months, cling to you like a second skin, cold and uncomfortable. The child whimpers, and you try to shield her with your body, but it's a futile gesture. Everyone gets wet. "Look at them," says a passing gentleman, umbrella held high as he hurries by. Like animals, his companion glances over, face twisted in disgust. Should be cleared away, bad for business having them there. They don't lower their voices, don't consider that you might hear or understand. In their eyes, you're not people. You're an inconvenience, an eyesore, something to be removed rather than helped. The workhouse door suddenly opens, nearly sending those leaning against it tumbling backward. A stern-faced woman peers out, her expression making it clear that she finds your presence objectionable. "Move aside," she orders, blocking the entrance. You shuffle to the edge of the steps, still trying to stay somewhat under the limited shelter of the entryway. The woman watches, arms folded. "You know the rules," she says. "You can come in and pick oakum for 3 days, or you can stay out here. Can't have it both ways." Picking oakum, the punishment task of unravelling old ropes until your fingers bleed, working for hours in exchange for a hard bed and barely edible food. It's considered a deterrent, not a help. The workhouse isn't meant to be comfortable, it's designed to be just barely preferable to death on the streets. And sometimes even that line blurs. "Got a place for the child?" you ask, nodding toward the little girl. The woman's face softens almost imperceptibly. Children's ward, but she can't leave when she pleases like the casual ward. She'd be committed properly, and that settles it. Sarah would lose her child if you took that option. The workhouse separates families as a matter of policy, believing poverty is somehow contagious among relations. "We'll manage," Mary says firmly, pulling the child closer. The door closes, leaving you all back in your original positions, but considerably wetter. The rain continues to fall, and you can already feel the chill settling into your bones. Tomorrow will bring aches, possibly fever, but that's tomorrow's problem. For now, you focus on the small task of surviving the next hour. Then, the hour after that. Breaking life into these tiny increments is the only way to keep going when the future holds no obvious hope. "Tell us about your son again," Elizabeth says to Mary as the rain drums on the stone around you. Mary's expression shifts, a shadow of her former self visible as she speaks of the boy she raised, now a young man of 15 with unjustifiable pride that keeps him from selling matches even as they both starve. "Could be working," she says, her voice carrying both frustration and defence. "Smart lad, but he says there are things he won't do, jobs beneath him." "No job beneath you when your belly's empty," Elizabeth comments. "He'll learn," Mary sighs. "Harder way than needs be, but he'll learn." The conversation drifts, as it often does among the crawlers, between immediate concerns, the rain, the cold, hunger, and distant dreams, a room with walls, steady work, enough food. The chasm between those two realities is so vast that the dreams might as well be fantasy, but they're necessary. Without them, what would be the point of enduring another day on these steps? The child has fallen asleep again, despite the rain and discomfort. Children adapt, you've noticed. They find ways to exist in whatever circumstances they're born to or thrust into. It's a kind of resilience that's both miraculous and heartbreaking. "Someone coming," warns Elizabeth, her eyes fixed on a figure moving purposefully toward your group. It's not the police or workhouse staff. They have a certain way of walking that signals authority and trouble. This is different. A woman, well dressed, but not ostentatiously so, carrying something under her arm. "You there?" she calls as she approaches. "The child's mother. Is she here?" "Works at the coffee shop," Mary answers cautiously. "Back at 4. The woman nods, coming closer. She looks uncomfortable, like someone forcing herself to complete an unpleasant task. Her gaze keeps slipping away from your faces. "I'm from the Ladies' Charitable Association," she says, her voice clipped. "We've heard about the child being out in all weather. It's not proper care. A chill that has nothing to do with the rain runs through you. The child is now awake, sensing the tension, pressing herself against your side. She's well looked after," you say firmly. "Her mother works, does what she can. Nonetheless," the woman continues, "children should not be raised on the streets. We have an orphanage." "She's not an orphan," Elizabeth cuts in, her voice sharper than you've heard it. "She has a mother who loves her." The charity woman looks pained. Love isn't enough when a child is exposed to the elements, to disease, to unsavoury influences. She means you. You and the other crawlers are the unsavoury influences she fears will corrupt this child, as if poverty is somehow catching like a disease that might infect her through proximity. "Her mother will be back at 4, Mary repeats, more firmly this time. "Tell her your concerns then?" The woman hesitates, clearly weighing her options. Finally, she places a small package on the step. "Bread and cheese," she says, "for the child." Then she's gone, hurrying away as if afraid to linger too long near your misery. The package sits untouched for a moment. Pride and hunger wage their eternal battle. Hunger wins, as it almost always does. The food is divided, the largest portion for the child as the intended recipient, but small pieces for each of you. It's the first real food you've had in days. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, knowing it might be long before such bounty comes again. "Ladies' Charitable Association," Elizabeth mutters after she's finished her portion. "Coming for the child next, you mark my words." The thought sits heavy in the damp air. Well-meaning charity often comes with strings attached, with judgments about how the poor should behave, what they deserve. And children are seen as salvageable in a way adults are not. A child might be rescued from this life, while you and the others are considered beyond saving. but that's a worry for another hour. For now, the rain has slowed to a drizzle, and your stomach is less empty than it was. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. The day stretches ahead, hours of discomfort to endure before nightfall brings its own challenges. But you've survived this far. Another day on the workhouse steps. Another day as a crawler of St. Giles. Another day alive when so many in your position are not. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to rest them from the strain of constant vigilance. The sounds of London wash over you. Cartwheels on cobblestones, distant shouts from market sellers, the ever-present dripping of water from eaves and gutters. This moment, this exact moment of relative quiet, is as good as it gets, and you know enough to recognize it, to hold it close before the next crisis arrives. "It's stopping," Mary says, meaning the rain. But nothing really stops here on the workhouse steps. It just pauses, gathering strength for the next assault on your already battered defences. You open your eyes to face whatever comes next. The rain has finally stopped. Your clothes are still damp, clinging uncomfortably to your skin, but at least no new water is falling from the sky. Small mercies. Mary shifts beside you, wincing as she tries to find a position that doesn't aggravate her aching joints. The others call her the widow, though she rarely uses the term herself. Her husband was a tailor, died about 10 years back, left her with not much except the skills she'd picked up watching him work. "Tell me about before," you say quietly, as the child dozes against your shoulder. "Your son-in-law's place?" Mary gives you a look, sharp at first, then softening. People on these steps don't usually talk about their before lives. It's like picking at a scab, but sometimes the stories come out anyway, especially on quieter days when the hunger isn't screaming quite so loud. "Not much to tell," she says finally. "My Arthur, that's my husband. He was good with a needle, taught me some, though my eyes were never as sharp as his." She rubs at her eyes now, as if remembering. They're red-rimmed, perpetually irritated from the smoke of London and whatever illness has been slowly claiming her vision. "When he passed, I went to live with my daughter and her husband. He's a marble stone polisher, or was. Health's not good." "Fancy job," Elizabeth comments, clearly trying to picture something so far removed from your current circumstances. Mary snorts. Fancy enough, but he never cared much for his work. That was half the trouble right there. You can picture it easily enough. The tensions in a small home when money is tight and work is avoided. You've seen enough families crumble under lesser pressures. "How long did you stay?" you ask. "Nearly 8 years, she says, a hint of pride in her voice. "Wasn't all bad at first. I helped with the house, with their children, did what tailoring I could while my eyes still allowed it." The way she says it reveals so much. The slow decline of her vision, the gradual reduction in her usefulness to the household, the shifting of power as she became a burden rather than a help. "Stone polisher," mutters the man who's joined your group more recently. You call him James, though you're not entirely sure that's his name. Met one once. Hands like sandpaper. Could strike a match just by thinking about it. Mary nods. "That's the job. But my son-in-law's hands were soft as a clerk's. Like I said, he never took to the work." "What changed?" Elizabeth asks. "After 8 years?" Mary's face darkens. She glances at the boy sleeping a few steps below you, her son, 15 years old but looks younger, painfully thin, with that strange mix of childhood and old age that extreme poverty stamps on the young. "The fighting got worse," she says finally. "My daughter, her husband, me, the boy. Too many bodies, not enough bread. The things that get said when everyone's hungry." She trails off, lost in memories you can see playing across her face like shadows. Must have been bad, you prompt gently, to make these steps seem better. Wasn't my choice, she says sharply. Then, softer, well, not entirely. I could see what was happening. My presence was making things worse for my daughter. The arguments between her and her husband, sometimes about me, sometimes just with me as the excuse. I thought if I left, maybe they'd have a chance. And the boy, you ask, looking at her son? She sighs deeply, a sound that seems to come from some hollow place inside her. He wouldn't stay without me, stubborn, like his father that way. Elizabeth makes a small noise that might be sympathy or might be judgment. The line between the two gets blurry out here. No one has the energy for pure compassion. So one morning we just left, Mary continues. Took what little was ours, which wasn't much, and walked out. Thought we'd find some place. Work, maybe a room. She laughs then, a short, bitter sound. God, how stupid that seems now, as if jobs and rooms are just sitting there waiting for people like us to claim them. The streets of London were never designed to accommodate the excess of humanity they now contain. Work is scarce, even for the healthy and well-connected. For a woman with failing eyesight and a proud, untrained boy, the city might as well have been walled off. First night was the worst, Mary says, her voice dropping so low you have to lean in to hear her. We walked all day. My feet were bleeding through my boots. The boy was hungry, kept asking when we'd stop, and I had no answer, nowhere to go. You nod, remembering your own first night without shelter, the disbelief that keeps you walking long after your body is begging to stop, the certainty that there must be some solution just around the next corner, the slow, crushing realization that the streets don't care if you have nowhere to sleep. "Where'd you end up?" asks James. "Church steps at first," Mary says. "St. Martin's. Wasn't bad for a few nights, but the constables there are strict. Move you along quick if they catch you." That's how it goes in London, a constant shuffle from one marginally safe spot to another, never settling, never resting properly, until the body gives out enough that even that becomes impossible. Then you become a crawler, too weak to keep up the nomadic existence of the typical homeless. "Boy still has his pride," Mary says, glancing down at her son again. "Won't beg, won't sell matches, says it's beneath him." Elizabeth clucks her tongue, but there's a hint of approval in her eyes. Pride is a luxury none of you can afford, but you understand its appeal. When you have nothing else left, sometimes pride is the only possession that still feels like yours. "He's got no clothes," Mary continues, "everything pawned, covered in rags, but still gives himself airs above his station." She says this last part with a complicated mix of frustration and admiration. The boy stirs in his sleep as if sensing he's being discussed. He doesn't fully wake though. Sleep is precious currency out here, not to be wasted. "How'd you end up here specifically?" you ask, meaning these particular workhouse steps in St. Giles. Mary shrugs. "Heard there was a constable who didn't bother the crawlers much, and it was close enough to the coffee shop where we could sometimes get hot water." She nods toward the sleeping child. Then Sarah started bringing her little one, and it seemed like a good arrangement. The informal networks of London's destitute are invisible to those with homes and jobs, but they're as real and vital as any official institution. Information passes from person to person, which parishes offer bread on which days, which constables are cruel and which look the other way, where to find water, where to shelter when the weather turns deadly. "Boy used to cry at night," Mary says suddenly. "First few weeks, not anymore." You all absorb this simple statement, understanding all it implies. Tears require energy, hope, belief that things should be different. Eventually, the body conserves what little resources it has. Crying becomes an unaffordable luxury. My Agnes is the same, says Sarah, who has appeared so quietly that you didn't notice her approach. She's early today, not yet 4 o'clock when she usually retrieves her child. Doesn't cry much anymore. Sarah looks marginally better than the rest of you. Working at the coffee shop has its benefits. She's indoors for hours each day, occasionally gets scraps of food, and most importantly, has a address of sorts that allows her to maintain a tenuous grip on respectability. But the cost is visible in her exhausted face, the way her hands tremble slightly from overwork. She's been sleeping, Elizabeth tells her, nodding toward the child. Had some bread and cheese earlier. Sarah's face lights up. Bread? Real bread? Lady from the Charitable Association, Mary explains. Came by looking for you, actually. Had concerns. The light in Sarah's face dims immediately. What kind of concerns? You all exchange glances. No one wants to be the one to say it. About the child being out here, Elizabeth finally says. In all weathers. Sarah's shoulders slump. As if I have a choice. As if there's anywhere else for her to be while I work. The charitable associations of London mean well mostly. They distribute food, old clothes, occasionally offer a night's shelter, but their help comes wrapped in judgment, in an unshakable belief that poverty is at least partially a moral failing. Their solution for a child on the streets is almost always the same. Removal to an institution where the pernicious influence of her pauper mother can be countered with strict moral instruction. What did you tell them? Sarah asks, gathering her still sleeping daughter into her arms. That you'd be back at 4, Mary says simply. And they left the bread, Elizabeth adds, as if this makes everything better. Sarah nods, but her eyes are worried. She knows, as you all do, that once the charitable ladies take notice, they rarely just go away. They'll be back with more questions, more solutions that solve everything except what really needs solving. I can't lose her, Sarah whispers, holding the child closer. You won't, Mary says, with more confidence than any of you feel. We'll figure something out. This is the strange paradox of your existence. You who have nothing still find ways to look out for each other. The shared teapot, the communal watch over Sarah's child, the pooling of information and what meagre resources you manage to acquire. It's not charity, it's survival. I heard a rumour, Sarah says, changing the subject with obvious effort, about the hop fields. The mood shifts instantly. The hop fields of Kent are a rare bright spot in the year for many of London's poorest. For a few weeks each autumn there's work to be had harvesting hops for beer making. The work is hard, but the pay is relatively fair, and most importantly, it's available to almost anyone healthy enough to do it. No questions about your background, no permanent address required. Or when? Mary asks eagerly, suddenly looking more alert than she has all day. 3 weeks, they say, Sarah replies. They're taking names at the Bull and Crown for the wagons. For the crawlers, the hop fields represent more than just temporary work. They're a chance, however slim, at escaping the streets entirely. A good season in the fields can mean enough money saved to rent a room, to buy decent clothes, to create the minimum appearance of respectability needed to secure regular employment. We should put our names down, you say, surprising yourself with the surge of hope. Elizabeth shakes her head. Need a shilling deposit for the wagon, refunded when you arrive, but still need it up front. And just like that, the hope flickers. A shilling might as well be £100 when you have nothing. I could... Sarah hesitates, clearly calculating in her head. I might be able to save a little from the coffee shop. Not enough for everyone, but maybe 1 or 2. The unspoken question hangs in the air. Who would get the chance if not everyone could go? Mary should, Elizabeth says firmly. Her and the boy, best chance of making something of it after. Mary looks startled. I couldn't take your chance. My bones won't last a day in the fields, Elizabeth says matter-of-factly. And the rest of us? She gestures vaguely, encompassing the various ailments and weaknesses that define your group. It's true, Mary, despite her failing eyes, is one of the stronger crawlers, and her son, if he could overcome his pride, is young and could earn well in the fields. They have the best chance of turning a hop-picking season into a real escape. My boy would never agree. Mary sighs, too proud to pick hops. Might be time he learned pride doesn't fill empty stomachs, James says bluntly. The conversation is interrupted by a commotion further down the street. A group of young men, clearly drunk despite the early hour, are shouting and shoving each other as they make their way toward the workhouse steps. Trouble, Elizabeth mutters. You all instinctively draw closer together. Street drunks are unpredictable. Sometimes they pass by with nothing worse than insults. Sometimes they're feeling generous and toss a penny or two, and sometimes they're looking for sport at the expense of those who can't fight back. "Wake the boy," you whisper to Mary. She shakes her son's shoulder gently. He comes awake immediately with the instant alertness that street life demands. "What is it?" he asks, voice still thick with sleep. "Just some rowdies," Mary says quietly. "Stay close." The young men are almost upon you now, 5 of them, well dressed enough to suggest trades or clerk positions, old enough to know better than to harass the destitute, young enough not to care. "Well, look here," says the apparent leader, swaying slightly as he stops in front of your group. "A proper collection of dosses." His companions laugh too loudly. One of them mimics your hunched postures, drawing more laughter. "Don't engage," Elizabeth warns under her breath. "They'll tire of it faster. You keep your eyes down, focusing on a crack in the stone step. Experience has taught you that eye contact can be interpreted as a challenge, or worse, as an invitation to further interaction. "Oi! You!" the leader says, addressing Mary's son directly. "You look young enough to work. Why are you sitting with these old wrecks?" The boy stiffens but says nothing. His mother's hand tightens on his arm. "Asked you a question, boy," the drunk persists. Mary's son finally looks up, his face a mask of cold dignity that seems bizarrely out of place given his ragged appearance. "I am employed, sir, simply taking my rest." The lie is delivered with such perfect composure that for a moment even you almost believe it. The formal language, the respectful "sir," the implication that he's merely a working man taking a break. It's a performance designed to create distance between himself and the crawlers he sits among. The drunk blinks, momentarily thrown by the response. His companions exchange glances. "Employed doing what?" one of them asks suspiciously. Mary's son doesn't hesitate. "I assist my uncle in his literary pursuits. He's completing a volume on the economic conditions of the modern city. The fabrication is so specific, so confidently stated, that it creates confusion among the drunks. They weren't expecting articulate responses from the workhouse steps. He's having you on, Tom," one of the young men mutters. "He's just a beggar." "I assure you, I am not," the boy continues, his voice taking on an even more refined quality. "Though I understand the confusion given my current attire, an unfortunate accident with a cart this morning quite ruined my proper clothes. You can hardly believe what you're hearing." The sheer audacity of the performance and the skill with which he's delivering it is astonishing. This is the unjustifiable pride Mary mentioned, manifesting as a complete rejection of his actual circumstances. The drunks are growing visibly uncomfortable. What started as an easy target for their amusement has turned into something they don't quite know how to handle. "If you'll excuse me," the boy concludes, "I must return to my work shortly. Good day, gentlemen." He delivers this last line with a slight nod, as if dismissing servants. The effect is so incongruous with his ragged appearance that the drunks actually back up a step. "Come on," their leader mutters. "Nothing worth bothering with here." They move on, casting confused glances back at your group as they go. When they're safely out of earshot, Elizabeth lets out a low whistle. "Well, I never," she says, looking at Mary's son with new respect. Where'd he learn to talk like that? Mary's expression is complicated, pride and worry battling for dominance. His father taught him his letters, and he's always had an ear for how the quality speak, picks it up from hanging around the better streets. The boy's face has already resumed its usual sullen expression. The performance, it seems, was for the benefit of the drunks only. "That was quite a story," you say to him directly. "About your uncle's book." He looks at you properly for the first time. "People believe what they expect to hear," he says with a shrug. "Those types expect everyone in our position to be ignorant, surprise them with a few big words and they don't know what to think." There's a sharp intelligence in his eyes that makes his current circumstances seem even more tragic. With education, with opportunities, what might he have become? "That trick won't work with the Hopfield foreman," James says, bringing the conversation back to the previous topic. "They want strong backs, not fancy talk." "I told you," Mary says tiredly, "he won't go to the fields." "I might," the boy says unexpectedly. Everyone turns to look at him in surprise. "If it meant getting off these steps," he continues, not meeting anyone's eyes. "If there was a real chance after, not just more of the same." The possibility of change hangs in the air between you all. It's dangerous hope. Out here, it usually leads to disappointment. But without it, what's the point of continuing at all? £1, Mary says softly. "That's what we'd need to save from the Hopfields. £1 would be enough to rent a room, get some proper clothes, have an address to give when applying for work." It doesn't sound like much. To most Londoners, £1 is a significant sum, but not an impossible one. From your current position, it might as well be a fortune. 3 weeks, Sarah says. "I'll try to put aside enough for the wagon deposit." The child in her arms stirs and wakes, blinking up at her mother in momentary confusion before recognition dawns. The simple joy that spreads across the little girl's face at the sight of her mother is a stark reminder of what's at stake here. Not just survival, but the preservation of these basic human connections that give life meaning. "Mama," she says, reaching up to touch Sarah's cheek. "You're early." "Yes, my love," Sarah replies, the weariness in her face momentarily lifted. "I finished my work sooner today." It's another lie, of course. Sarah has likely sacrificed some of her already meagre pay to leave early, probably worried by the charitable lady's visit. But the child doesn't need to know that. "We had bread," the little girl announces importantly. "And cheese." "So I heard," Sarah says, forcing brightness into her voice. "What a treat." The simple exchange, the determined attempt at normalcy despite everything, catches in your throat. This is what separates crawlers from the truly lost souls of London's streets. This stubborn insistence on maintaining the forms of human connection, of care, of hope. "I should get her home," Sarah says, rising carefully with the child in her arms. By home, she means the corner of a shared room in a lodging house where they sleep for the few hours between her evening and morning shifts at the coffee shop. "I'll walk with you," Mary's son offers suddenly, getting to his feet. "Make sure you get there all right." There's an awkward pause as everyone absorbs this unexpected gallantry. Sarah hesitates, then nods with a small smile. "Thank you," she says, That would be kind. As they walk away, Mary watches her son with an expression you can't quite read. First time he's offered to help anyone in weeks, she says finally. The hop fields changed him, Elizabeth observes. Just the idea of them. Don't count on it lasting, James cautions. Hope is cheap until it's time to do the actual work. But there's a shift in the atmosphere on the steps, subtle but definite. The mere possibility of change, of movement, of purpose has altered something. We should try to get some real rest, Mary says, practical as always. If there's any chance of the fields, we'll need our strength. The suggestion would be laughable in other circumstances, as if the hard stone steps and constant exposure could ever provide real rest. But you understand what she means. Conservation of energy, preparation, the small ways you can ready your bodies for the opportunity ahead, should it actually materialize. You settle back against the workhouse door, finding the least uncomfortable position possible. Your clothes are almost dry now, though they carry the damp chill that never quite leaves them in London's perpetual moisture. For the first time in longer than you can remember, you allow yourself to imagine a different future. Not a grand one. You're not dreaming of mansions or carriages. Just a room, walls, a bed, even a shared one, work that pays enough to eat regularly. It seems so modest, this dream, so attainable in theory, and yet from the workhouse steps, it might as well be the moon. Still, as you drift into that familiar half-sleep of the crawlers, the image stays with you. A room, a pound from the hop fields, a way back into the world that has stepped over and around you for so long. It's something to hold on to as the afternoon fades toward evening, as London's rhythms continue around you, as your body reminds you with each ache and pain of how far you have to climb just to reach the bottom rung of society again. Your eyes snap open at the sound of approaching footsteps. Even in half-sleep, your body reacts to potential threats or opportunities. The steps are too light for police, too purposeful for a drunk. You nudge Mary, who's dozed off beside you. "Someone coming," you whisper. It's late afternoon now. The brief hope sparked by talk of the hop fields has faded into the background, replaced by the more immediate concern that gnaws at you all. Hunger. The footsteps belong to a young woman who works as a maid in one of the nearby houses. She's clutching a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Mrs. Wilson said to bring this," she says without preamble, placing the bundle on the step beside Elizabeth. "Kitchen scraps for the child." She glances around, not seeing Sarah's daughter. "Where is she?" "With her mother," Mary answers. "Back later." The maid nods, clearly relieved to complete her errand quickly. "There's tea leaves in there too. Used once, but still good." With that, she's gone, hurrying away as if poverty might be contagious, but she's left behind something precious, kitchen scraps that would be garbage to her employers but are a feast to you. Elizabeth carefully unwraps the bundle. Inside is a collection that tells its own story of a wealthy household's meal. Gristly ends of meat, vegetable peelings, half a loaf of bread gone slightly stale, and a small paper packet of used tea leaves. "Christ, look at that bread," James says, his voice reverent. "The bread alone is better than anything you've seen in days. Not the heel or crust that you usually fight over, but actual middle slices, just a bit too stale for delicate palates." "We should wait," Elizabeth says, though her eyes don't leave the food. "Save some for Sarah and the little one." "Save the bread," Mary suggests, practical as always. "But that meat won't keep in this heat." No one argues with this assessment. The meat scraps are already attracting flies in the warm afternoon air. Better to eat them now than let them spoil. Elizabeth divides the meat pieces with the precision of someone who's turned food distribution into an art. No one gets exactly the same amount. That would be impossible with such irregular pieces. But she ensures that the portions are fair in their own way. More for those who need it most, considering size, health, how long since someone last ate. You receive a piece of gristle with a bit of actual meat still clinging to it. The flavour when you bite into it is so intense that you feel momentarily dizzy. Fat, salt, protein, things your body has been craving for so long that the mere hint of them is overwhelming. Eat slowly, Elizabeth advises, noting how quickly James is devouring his portion. Makes it last longer. Sits better in the stomach too. This is wisdom earned through experience. Eating too quickly after prolonged hunger often leads to sickness, your shrunken stomach rejecting what it most needs. You force yourself to chew thoroughly, to savour each morsel, even though every instinct screams at you to gulp it down before someone takes it away. Good day for scraps, Mary comments between careful bites. Must have been a proper dinner party. Sunday roast, I reckon, James says. Smells like lamb. This casual assessment of your meal's origins would seem bizarre to anyone not in your position, but the crawlers become experts in the cast-off remnants of other people's lives. You can tell a household's wealth by their garbage, can trace the outlines of celebrations through what gets thrown away. The meat, small portion though it is, works a kind of magic on your group. Colour returns to faces, postures straighten slightly, eyes grow more alert. It's not just the nutrition, though God knows you need it. It's the psychological effect of eating something that came from a proper kitchen, that was part of a normal meal. We should make tea, Elizabeth suggests, eyeing the packet of used leaves. When Sarah brings the child back, they can have some too. The ritual of tea-making is sacred among the crawlers, one of the few civilized practices you've managed to maintain despite everything. The leaves from the maid are a treasure, used only once in their household, which means they still have plenty of flavour left for your purposes. I'll go for water, you offer, feeling stronger after the food. The trip to Drury Lane is one you take turns making. It's not far as the crow flies, but when every step requires effort, when your shoes are falling apart and your body aches from sleeping on stone, even short distances become journeys. Take the teapot, Mary says, handing you the broken vessel that serves as your communal property. It's barely recognisable as a teapot anymore. No lid, no handle, the spout broken off long ago, but it holds water, and that's all that matters. You tuck it carefully under your arm, making sure the cracks that have been forming don't widen with the movement. Back soon, you tell the others, leveraging yourself up from the steps with effort. Standing fully upright takes a moment. Your body has grown accustomed to the hunched position of the steps and your spine protests the change. Once you're steady, you begin the walk to Drury Lane. The streets are busy with late afternoon traffic, workers heading home, delivery boys making final rounds, street vendors trying to sell the last of their wares before day's end. You move through this flow of humanity like a ghost, unnoticed and unremarked upon. That's the strange power of extreme poverty. It renders you invisible. People's eyes slide right past you, as if acknowledging your existence would somehow implicate them in your suffering. Occasionally, someone's gaze will catch on you for a moment, their expression shifting to discomfort or pity before quickly moving on. The coffee shop on Drury Lane comes into view, a modest establishment catering to workers and tradespeople rather than the genteel. The owner, Mr. Parker, is one of the few people in London who regularly shows kindness to the crawlers, allowing you to fill your vessels with boiling water when business is slow. You enter cautiously, waiting near the door until he notices you. The smell of coffee and baked goods is so powerful that your recently fed stomach growls embarrassingly loud. "Nah," Mr. Parker says when he spots you. "Water for the steps, is it?" You nod, holding out the broken teapot. "If it's not too much trouble." "Never trouble," he says, taking the pot from your hands. "Just mind you don't scald yourself on the way back. That thing's got no handle for a reason." As he fills the pot from the large kettle that constantly simmers on his stove, you spot Sarah working in the back corner, clearing tables. She doesn't see you, focused on her task, and you don't draw attention to yourself. Better not to remind her employer of her connections to the crawlers. "Where's little Agnes today?" Mr. Parker asks as he carefully returns the filled teapot to you. "Not seen her about?" "With her mother," you answer. "She came early to fetch her." He nods approvingly. Good, good. Weather's turning again. No place for a child out there. The genuine concern in his voice makes you wonder, not for the first time, why this particular man has such compassion when so many others look straight through you. Perhaps he knew poverty himself once. Perhaps he has family who fell on hard times. Or perhaps he's simply one of those rare souls born with an inability to ignore suffering. "Thank you," you say, more heartfelt than the simple words can convey. "Go on then," he says gruffly, seemingly embarrassed by gratitude, before it cools. The return journey requires even more care than the trip out. The teapot is hot, its contents precious. You curl your body around it protectively as you navigate the increasingly crowded streets. A spill would mean returning empty-handed, or worse, having to wait until tomorrow for another chance at hot water. When you finally make it back to the steps, you find that Mary's son has returned. He sits a slight distance from his mother, his face bearing the closed expression that seems to be his default, but there's something different about him. A subtle shift in posture, a slightly less hostile set to his shoulders. "Sarah?" you ask, carefully setting down the teapot on the flattest part of the step. "Took the child to the lodging house," he answers. "She's got night shift at the coffee shop soon." The others gather around as Elizabeth begins the delicate process of brewing the tea. The used leaves go into the bottom of the pot, swirling in the hot water as she gently agitates it with a stick. "Any word on the hop fields?" you ask Mary's son, curious about what might have prompted his slight change in demeanour. He glances at you, then away. "Stopped by the Bull and Crown. They're taking names starting Monday. Need a shilling deposit like you said." "Did you put your name down?" Mary asks, an edge of hope in her voice. "Didn't have a shilling, did I?" he responds, but without the bitter tone he might have used earlier. "But I asked around. There's a foreman named Watts who takes on first-timers. Pays fair, they say." It's the most you've heard him speak at one go, and the most engaged he seemed in anything since you've known him. The prospect of the hop fields has kindled something in him, a spark of purpose that poverty had nearly extinguished. "Tea's ready," Elizabeth announces. The brewing time is short, used leaves don't need to steep long, and the resulting liquid is pale, more memory of tea than actual tea. But it's hot, and it contains trace amounts of the caffeine and tannins your bodies crave. As with the food earlier, Elizabeth oversees the distribution. The teapot makes its way around your small circle, each person taking a sip before passing it on. There's an unspoken etiquette to this sharing. No one takes too much, everyone is careful with the fragile vessel, lips are wiped before drinking. "Told Sarah about the fields," Mary's son says after taking his turn at the teapot. "She thinks she might be able to get the deposit money. For 2, maybe." Mary's eyes widen slightly. "She'd do that? Why?" He shrugs. "Says she owes us for watching the kid." The simple transaction, childcare in exchange for a chance at the hop fields, makes perfect sense in the economy of the streets. No one here expects charity without reason. Everything is exchange. Everything has its price, even kindness. "If we get to the fields," Mary says carefully, her eyes on her son, "and if we earn enough, we could send back for the others." It's a generous thought, but one that everyone recognises as unlikely. The hop-picking season is short, the work hard, and the pay, while good compared to nothing, is hardly enough to fund multiple journeys or deposits. "One step at a time," Elizabeth says gently. "First, get the deposit, then get to the fields, then worry about the rest." This wisdom, focusing on the immediate challenge rather than distant possibilities, is another survival skill of the streets. Dreams are dangerous luxuries when they distract from the urgent needs of the present. The tea is finished all too quickly, the pot making only 2 rounds before the liquid is gone. But its effects linger. Warmth in your belly, a slight alertness that pushes back against the perpetual fatigue. Might be a church service tonight, James says, changing the subject. St Andrew's, they give bread after. This information passes through the group with interest. Religious services are one of the few reliable sources of charity, though they come with the expected price of sitting through sermons, often specifically designed to address the moral failings believed to cause poverty. What time? Mary asks. 7, I think, James replies. Temperance meeting after. Elizabeth snorts. Temperance, as if drink is our biggest worry. The absurdity of temperance lectures to people who can't afford food, let alone alcohol, brings a rare moment of humour to the steps. Even Mary's son cracks what might almost be a smile. Still, Mary says, practically worth it for the bread. And it's dry inside, you add, glancing at the sky where clouds are gathering again. Might rain later. The calculation is simple. Endure an hour of being told that moral weakness is the cause of your suffering in exchange for bread and shelter from the rain. It's an easy trade when you have so few options. What about the boy? Elizabeth asks, nodding toward Mary's son. Will he come? There's a moment of silence as everyone looks at the young man. His pride has kept him from many such charity opportunities before, deeming them too demeaning. I'll come, he says after a pause. If there's bread, another small victory for practicality over pride. Something is shifting in him, whether from hunger or the prospect of the hop fields or some internal reckoning only he knows. As the afternoon wears on, more crawlers arrive at the steps, drawn by the approaching evening and the relative safety of numbers. Some you know by name, others just by sight. Each has their own story of how they ended up here, though the broad strokes are often similar. Illness, job loss, family breakdown, the merciless mathematics of London poverty where one misfortune cascades into complete destitution. A woman you know as Hannah arrives, taking a spot on the lower steps. She's in her 40s perhaps, though she looks older, with a persistent cough that makes everyone maintain a careful distance. Consumption is one of the many spectres that haunt the crawlers. Passing easily, in the close quarters you're forced to share. Heard there's church bread tonight, she says by way of greeting, her voice raspy from coughing. St Andrew's at 7, James confirms. We're going. Hannah nods, settling herself as comfortably as possible on the hard stone. Police cleared out the arches yesterday. Everyone's scattered. This news travels through the group with ripples of concern. The arches, the spaces under railway bridges where many homeless seek shelter, ni cho, ni som. Cleaned up by police, forcing their inhabitants to find new spots. Often this means more people competing for the limited safe spaces like your workhouse steps. They won't bother us here, Elizabeth says with more confidence than anyone feels. Burke's on tonight. He leaves us be. The conversation turns to other news from around the neighbourhood. Which parishes are offering relief? Which areas are seeing increased police presence? Which lodging houses might take in someone without the full payment up front? This exchange of information is another survival mechanism, a way of navigating the treacherous landscape of poverty. As you talk, Mary's son slips away without announcement. He returns 20 minutes later carrying something wrapped in newspaper. "What's that?" Mary asks, suspicion and hope mingling in her voice. He unwraps the package to reveal a slightly bruised apple and half a meat pie that's seen better days. "Where'd you get those?" Mary demands. "Didn't steal them, if that's what you're thinking," he says defensively. "Helped unload a cart at the market, payment in kind." It's such a normal transaction, work exchanged for food, and yet it feels momentous, a step back toward the regular world of earning and consuming, away from the passive desperation of the steps. He breaks the apple into quarters, carefully cutting around the worst bruises with a small knife he produces from somewhere in his ragged clothes. The pie he divides with equal precision. Neither would be enough for one person in normal circumstances, but shared between your small group, it's an unexpected bounty. "What kind of work?" Mary asks as she accepts her portion, clearly trying to sound casual. "Just loading," he says with a shrug. "Nothing fancy, but the fellow said he might need help again tomorrow." The prospect of regular work, however minor, adds another layer to the cautious hope building among your group. First the hop fields, now this. Small things barely worth noticing in the grand scheme of London's economy, but seismic shifts in your limited world. The pie, though cold and slightly stale, tastes incredible. It's proper food, prepared in a kitchen, sold in a shop, a far cry from the scraps and charity bread that form the bulk of your diet. You savour each tiny bite, making it last as long as possible. "Good. In it?" Mary's son says, watching your faces as you eat. There's a hint of pride in his expression, a glimpse of what he might be if circumstances were different. A young man bringing home wages, contributing to a household, finding his place in the world. "Very good," Elizabeth confirms, finishing her small portion with the careful attention of someone who knows the next real meal is far from guaranteed. "You've done well, lad." The simple praise brings a flush to the boy's pale cheeks. Approval is as rare as good food on these steps. "Market needs help most mornings," he says, looking at his hands rather than meeting anyone's eyes. "Could try again tomorrow." "We should all try," you suggest, emboldened by the day's small victories. Different places increase the chances. It's an obvious idea, but one that hasn't seemed worth pursuing when the mere act of surviving from hour to hour takes all your energy. Today, with food in your stomach and the promise of bread at the church later, it suddenly seems possible to think beyond the immediate moment. The afternoon is fading toward evening now, the light taking on the golden quality that briefly makes even London's grimiest corners look almost beautiful. People are heading home from work, the street growing quieter as shops close and workers disappear into lodging houses and apartments. Soon you'll need to head to St Andrew's for the church service if you want that bread. It's a 15-minute walk for a healthy person, which means allowing twice that for your group with its various ailments and weaknesses. "Should we go now?" James asks, looking up at the sky where the clouds continue to gather. "Beat the rain?" As if in answer, the first drops begin to fall. Just a spatter at first, but with the promise of more to come. The decision is made for you. Church it is, and now rather than later. Everyone begins the slow process of standing, joints protesting, muscles stiff from hours on the hard steps. You help Elizabeth, whose arthritis makes the movement particularly painful for her. "You're a good girl," she tells you as she finally gets upright, leaning heavily on your arm. "Deserved better than these steps." "We all did," you say simply. As your ragtag group prepares to make its way to St Andrews, you cast one last glance back at the workhouse door that has become your home of sorts. It offers little enough protection, yet leaving even this scant shelter creates anxiety. Will other crawlers claim your spots? Will the police move everyone along while you're gone? Will the rain soak the steps so thoroughly that they'll be unusable when you return? But bread and temporary shelter from the rain outweigh these concerns. You join the others as they begin their slow procession toward the church, each step deliberate, each movement carefully calculated to conserve energy, the hope that has been building throughout the day. The hop fields, the market work, the unexpected food carries you forward. Tomorrow might be different. Tomorrow might be the beginning of something else. Tomorrow, perhaps, you won't be just a crawler anymore. For now, though, you are still what London has made you. Invisible, except when you're a nuisance, desperate enough to make tea from used leaves, grateful for stale bread and scraps, a ghost drifting through the edges of a city that has no place for those who fall. But as you walk beside Mary, watching her son move with slightly more purpose than before, you allow yourself the dangerous luxury of imagining something better. Not a miracle, just a room, a job, a life that doesn't revolve around these steps. The rain begins to fall more heavily, and you quicken your pace as much as your tired body allows. Behind you, the workhouse looms, its shadow stretching across the now empty steps. Ahead, somewhere, is St. Andrew's, with its hard pews, judgmental sermon, and precious bread. You walk on, caught between these two poles of London charity, the institutional coldness of the workhouse and the conditional kindness of the church, knowing that somewhere beyond both must exist a better answer, if only you can find the strength to reach it. The rain falls harder as your group makes its slow way towards St. Andrew's. London in the wet is a miserable place for those without umbrellas or proper coats. The water finds every hole in your shoes, every tear in your clothing. By the time the church spire comes into view, you're all thoroughly soaked. Might as well have jumped in the Thames, grumbles James, water streaming from his matted hair. At least we'd be cleaner, Mary jokes weakly. St. Andrew's looms ahead, its stone facade darkened by decades of London soot. The doors stand open, light spilling out into the gloomy evening. Already a line has formed, the poor of the parish coming for the promised bread, willing to endure the sermon for the food that follows. As you approach, you notice the subtle sorting that occurs automatically. Those with homes but little money stand closest to the door, dressed in their shabby but clean church clothes. Behind them are the regular beggars, many of whom you recognise from the streets around St. Giles. And at the very back, by unspoken agreement, are your kind, the crawlers, deemed too ragged, too dirty, too hopeless even for the company of ordinary beggars. Back of the line, a church warden says unnecessarily as your group approaches. He's a portly man with the righteous expression of someone who believes poverty is a moral failing, and mind you don't drip on the pews. Yes, sir, Mary says, her voice taking on the deferential tone that experience has taught all of you to use with those in even minor positions of authority. Very kind to let us in at all, sir. Her son watches this exchange with barely concealed disgust, but he says nothing. The promise of bread is enough to keep even his pride in check. You join the back of the line, standing in the rain while those ahead of you file into the church. When your turn finally comes, another warden at the door gives each of you a searching look, as if assessing whether you're worthy of entry. He pauses at Hannah, whose wet coughing has grown worse during the walk. No consumptives, he says firmly. Health risk to the congregation. Hannah's face falls. Please, sir, just for the bread. I'll stay at the very back. Rules are rules, he says, unmoved. There's the workhouse for your sort. Elizabeth steps forward, her ancient dignity somehow intact despite her soaked appearance. She comes with us, or none of us come, she says quietly. Your choice. It's a bluff, and a risky one. The bread is too important to forfeit, but Elizabeth has calculated correctly that the warden wants the church to appear charitable. 6 fewer attendees would look bad for their numbers. The warden hesitates, then waves you all through with obvious reluctance. back row only, and control that cough. Inside, the church is warm and dry, two qualities that make it seem like paradise after the cold rain. Candles and gas lamps illuminate the space, casting long shadows across the wooden pews and stone floor. The front rows are already filled with the parish's more respectable poor, while the middle section houses the regular beggars. Your group makes its way to the very back, where a few other crawlers have already claimed spots. "Look," Mary whispers, nodding toward the front of the church. "Sarah's here." Sure enough, Sarah is seated in the middle section, little Agnes beside her. She's clearly come straight from the coffee shop, still wearing the apron that marks her as a working woman. The child leans against her mother's side, eyes half closed with exhaustion. You settle onto the hard wooden pew, your wet clothes immediately creating a puddle beneath you. The warmth of the church feels wonderful after the cold rain, though you know from experience that sitting in damp clothes, even in a heated building, will lead to aches and chills later. "Bread better be worth it," mutters Mary's son, shifting uncomfortably on the bench. "It's dry, it's warm, there's food after," his mother reminds him quietly. "More than we'd have on the steps tonight." The church continues to fill as the appointed hour approaches. You notice several members of the Ladies' Charitable Association taking seats near the front, their neat bonnets and dry clothes in stark contrast to the bedraggled appearance of those they've come to help and judge. "That's her," Elizabeth whispers, nodding toward a severe-looking woman in a dark dress. "The one who came about Agnes." You recognize her as the woman who brought bread and cheese for the child earlier, the one who spoke of orphanages and proper care with that particular tone that charitable ladies use when they believe they know what's best for other people's children. "Hope she doesn't make trouble for Sarah," you whisper back. Before Elizabeth can respond, the service begins. The vicar, a thin man with a voice that carries surprisingly well, leads the congregation in a prayer. You bow your head out of habit rather than devotion, your thoughts more focused on the bread to come than the words being spoken. The sermon, when it begins, is exactly what you expected, a discourse on moral improvement as the path out of poverty, with frequent references to the evils of drink, gambling, and loose living. The message is clear: the poor are poor because of their own failings, and salvation, both spiritual and material, lies in moral reformation. "Bit rich, innit?" James whispers, too low for anyone but your immediate group to hear. Never seen him miss a meal in his life betting. The irony isn't lost on any of you. The vicar, well-fed and secure, lecturing on the virtues of temperance and thrift to people who haven't had a proper meal in days, who count every penny and still can't afford a roof over their heads. Mary's son listens with an expression that grows increasingly stony as the sermon progresses. When the vicar begins a particularly passionate condemnation of idleness as the mother of poverty, you see the boy's hands clench into fists on his knees. "Easy," Mary murmurs, placing a weathered hand over his. "Bread, remember?" The sermon seems to last an eternity, though in reality it's probably no more than 30 minutes. Throughout, Hannah struggles to suppress her cough, earning glares from the warden whenever she fails. The atmosphere in the church grows increasingly stuffy as wet clothes steam in the warmth, creating a fog of damp wool and unwashed bodies that rises toward the vaulted ceiling. Finally, the vicar concludes with a prayer for the moral improvement of his congregation, followed by an announcement about the bread distribution that will take place in the parish hall adjoining the church. "Orderly lines," he instructs, as if speaking to children. "Women and children first, then men. Those from the workhouse steps at the very end." This last directive brings a murmur of discontent from your section, quickly silenced by a sharp look from the wardens. The hierarchy is clear and non-negotiable. Even among the poor, there are divisions, and crawlers are at the bottom. The congregation files out toward the parish hall, maintaining the same invisible but rigid sorting that governed their entry. Your group waits, as instructed, until the very end. As you pass through the doorway connecting the church to the hall, you spot Sarah and Agnes, already receiving their bread from one of the Ladies' Association members, the same severe woman who visited the steps earlier. The woman is speaking to Sarah, her expression concerned but unyielding. Sarah keeps shaking her head, holding Agnes closer to her side. Even from a distance, the tension in the exchange is obvious. Trouble, Elizabeth observes quietly. You make your way to the breadline, moving as quickly as your tired bodies allow. By the time you reach the table where the distribution is happening, Sarah and Agnes have been escorted to a side room by the charitable lady and another woman from the association. "1 piece each," says the man, handing out the bread, barely looking at your group. "Take it and go." The bread is fresh, at least, large leaves cut into thick slices. Each piece would sell for a penny at a bakery, making it a significant windfall for people in your position. You accept your portion with the appropriate show of gratitude, tucking it carefully into a pocket to keep it as dry as possible for the journey back. Mary's son takes his bread without a word of thanks, earning a disapproving look from the distributor, but he's already turning away, his attention fixed on the side room where Sarah and Agnes have been taken. "What do you think they're doing?" he asks his mother, nodding toward the closed door. "Nothing good," Mary replies grimly. "Those ladies have decided Agnes needs saving, I'd wager." The bread distribution continues efficiently, each crawler receiving their portion and moving aside for the next. When everyone in your group has their share, you gather near the exit, reluctant to head back into the rain, but aware that your welcome in the warm, dry hall is limited. "Should we wait for Sarah?" you ask, glancing toward the side room. "Make sure she's all right?" Before anyone can answer, the door opens and Sarah emerges with Agnes in her arms. The child is crying softly, her face pressed against her mother's neck. Sarah herself looks pale and shaken, but there's a determined set to her jaw. She spots your group and makes her way over, ignoring the disapproving looks from the Ladies' Association members who follow her from the room. "They want to take her," she says without preamble, her voice low and urgent. "Say a child needs a proper home, not a lodging house room and workhouse steps. They can't just take her," Mary says, though her tone suggests she's not entirely convinced of this. "You're her mother." "They can, if they decide I'm unfit," Sarah replies bitterly. And a coffee shop girl with no husband fits their definition nicely. The reality of Sarah's situation hits home. Unlike many women in her position, she's managed to maintain employment and keep her child with her, but that precarious balance requires the informal childcare arrangement with your group on the steps, an arrangement that looks like neglect to the charitable ladies who have no concept of the impossible choices facing a single woman in London. "What will you do?" Elizabeth asks, her voice gentle but practical. Sarah adjusts Agnes on her hip, the child's crying having subsided to occasional hiccups. "Don't know yet. They've given me a week to make suitable arrangements or they'll petition for removal." "What counts as suitable?" you ask. "Not leaving her with—" Sarah stops, looking uncomfortable. "With people on the steps. No offence meant. None taken," Elizabeth assures her. "We know how it looks." The brutal honesty of the moment hangs in the air. To the outside world, your group represents the very bottom of society, unsuitable guardians for a child despite the genuine care you provide. The facts of your situation, the shared teapot, the careful division of food, the protection offered against the elements, count for nothing against the visible signs of your destitution. "I could," Mary's son begins, then stops, seeming surprised at his own impulse to speak. When all eyes turn to him, he continues reluctantly, "I could watch her somewhere else, not on the steps, if I had somewhere to take her." The offer is unexpected, especially coming from a boy who has shown little interest in anything beyond his own survival until very recently. Sarah looks at him with equal parts surprise and consideration. "The market," you suggest, making the connection. "If you're working there and it's undercover," Mary's son nods slowly. "Manager seemed to think I might be useful. If I had regular work, I could keep an eye on her there. Better than the steps, anyway." "The ladies wouldn't like a market?" "Much better," Sarah says doubtfully. "Better than our current arrangement," Mary points out. "And if he's working, being paid, that's respectable. You could say he's a proper childminder you're paying." The plan has obvious flaws. It depends on the boy getting regular work, on the market manager allowing a child to be present, on the ladies' association accepting this alternative. But it's a starting point, a possible way forward that doesn't end with Agnes in an orphanage. "Let me talk to the manager tomorrow," the boy says with newfound determination. "See what's possible." Sarah looks at him for a long moment, clearly weighing his reliability against her limited options. "All right," she says finally, "it's worth trying." "Mrs. Collins," calls one of the charity ladies, approaching your group with obvious reluctance to come too close. "Your shift begins soon, does it not? Perhaps you should be on your way." Sarah straightens, adjusting her expression to one of appropriate deference. "Yes, ma'am, just making arrangements for Agnes, as you suggested." "With these people?" The woman makes no attempt to hide her disapproval. "With William here," Sarah says smoothly, nodding toward Mary's son. "He's employed at the market and has kindly offered to mind Agnes during my shifts, for a fee, of course." The sudden bestowal of a specific name, William, on Mary's son catches you by surprise. You've never heard anyone call him by name before. Whether Sarah made it up on the spot or somehow knew it already, the effect is immediate. The boy straightens slightly, as if the simple act of being addressed as a person with a name rather than the boy or Mary's son has awakened something in him. The charity lady looks sceptical but slightly less disapproving. The market is hardly an appropriate environment for a child. "Better than many alternatives," Sarah counters gently, "and only until I can make more permanent arrangements. It's a masterful performance, deferential enough to avoid offence, but firm in its practical assessment of the situation." The charity lady seems momentarily at a loss for a response. "We shall see," she says finally. "A week, Mrs. Collins. That was our agreement." With that, she returns to her colleagues, leaving your group in a huddle near the exit. The rain continues outside, visible through the open door, but at least it has lessened to a steady drizzle rather than the downpour of earlier. "William, is it?" Mary says quietly to her son, a question in her voice. He shrugs, looking uncomfortable. "It's my name, isn't it?" "Haven't heard you use it in a while," she replies. There's something sad and wistful in her expression, as if the name belongs to a different boy from a different time, before the steps and the hunger and the gradual stripping away of identity that comes with extreme poverty. "Needs a name if he's going to be respectable," Elizabeth observes practically. "Can't just be the boy if he's working at the market." William, And it's strange even in your thoughts to suddenly attach a specific name to someone you've known only as an extension of his mother. Looks both embarrassed and pleased by this small recognition of his personhood. Better get back to the steps, James says, nodding toward the darkening sky visible through the door. Beat the night crowds. He's right. As evening deepens into night, the competition for safe sleeping spots intensifies. Your group's regular place on the workhouse steps isn't guaranteed if you're away too long. Sarah adjusts Agnes on her hip again. I should get to work. If I'm late, Mr. Parker might reconsider keeping me on, and then none of this matters anyway. I'll walk part way with you, William offers. Talk more about tomorrow. There's a moment of surprised silence at this continued show of initiative from the formerly sullen boy. Mary watches her son with an expression that mingles hope and wariness, as if afraid to believe in this transformation. Right then, Elizabeth says briskly, back to the steps for the rest of us. Your group splits, Sarah and William heading toward the coffee shop, while the rest of you brace yourselves for the journey back to St. Giles. The bread in your pocket feels like treasure, its weight a promise of something substantial in your stomach tonight. Combined with the scraps from earlier, it's been a relatively good day for food, a rarity in the precarious existence of the crawlers. The walk back is slower than the journey to the church. The brief respite in the warm, dry building has allowed your muscles to stiffen, making movement more painful. The rain, though lighter now, still finds its way through your inadequate clothing, and the approaching night brings a deeper chill to the air. Think the boy will really work the market? James asks as you trudge through puddles that splash over the broken tops of your shoes. If there's work to be had, Mary replies. He seemed different today. The name helped, you observe. William gave him something to live up to, maybe. Elizabeth nods thoughtfully. Names matter. Out here, they're often all we have left. This simple truth resonates with all of you. In the world of the crawlers, where possessions are few and security non-existent, identity becomes both precious and fragile. Some, like Elizabeth, cling fiercely to their names and the histories they represent. Others shed them, preferring anonymity or reinvention. William seems to be reclaiming his, a small but significant step toward rejoining the world beyond the steps. As St. Giles comes into view, you can't help but reflect on the strange, unexpected developments of the day. This morning, your group was focused solely on immediate survival, finding tea, staying dry, avoiding trouble. Now there's talk of the hop fields, market work, childcare arrangements. Plans that extend beyond the next hour or the next meal. Dangerous luxuries, perhaps, in a world where disappointment is the most reliable outcome, but necessary too, in their way. Without some hope, however fragile, the steps become not just a temporary resting place, but a grave. Someone's in our spot, Hannah says suddenly, pointing ahead to the workhouse steps. Sure enough, a group of unfamiliar figures occupies the prime positions near the door. They're huddled together, their postures conveying the same desperate search for warmth and minimal comfort that characterises all crawlers. Parish clearance, probably, James mutters, pushed out from somewhere else. Territorial disputes among the homeless rarely involve direct confrontation. Few have the energy for physical conflicts, but they're nonetheless tense and potentially dangerous. Space is limited, especially spaces that offer even minimal protection from the elements. What now, you ask, looking to Elizabeth and Mary for guidance. As the longest-term residents of these particular steps, they have an unspoken authority in such matters. Elizabeth studies the new arrivals with a practiced eye. Only 4 of them. We're 6. We can fit if they're reasonable. And if they're not, Hannah's voice carries a hint of fear. In her weakened state, another night in the rain could be deadly. Let's find out, Mary says grimly, leading your group forward. The newcomers watch your approach with wary eyes. They're a mixed group, 2 men, a woman, and what appears to be a teenage girl. All bear the unmistakable signs of prolonged destitution. Gaunt faces, filthy clothing, the distinctive hunched posture that comes from sleeping upright for too long. "Evening," Elizabeth says as your group reaches the steps. Her tone is neutral but carries a subtle assertion of prior claim. "Been here long?" One of the men, older than the rest, with a matted grey beard, responds cautiously. "Couple hours, moved on from Covent Garden, police clearance." "These are our regular spots," Mary explains, not unkindly, but firmly. "Have been for months." The newcomers exchange glances. Between 1837 and 1901, millions of young people navigated Victorian courtship, a minefield of strict rules, secret codes, and social death if you made one wrong move. The stakes were impossibly high, but somehow people still managed to flirt, fall in love, and get married without dying of embarrassment. Here's what dating was really like in the Victorian era. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I always wonder where everyone's at, so comment your city and what time it is. Weird to think some of you are having breakfast in London while I'm recording this at night here in the States. Alright, let's head back to London, 1862. Trust me, it's gonna be quite a ride. But first, get comfortable. Seriously. Adjust those pillows, pull up that blanket, because where we're going, you're going to want to be cozy. It's 6:15 in the morning, and you're about to wake up as 19-year-old Eleanor Hartwell. Your eyes flutter open to the dim grey light filtering through heavy damask curtains. The first sensation is the chill. Your bedroom is freezing. Unlike your toasty modern bed with its memory foam and down comforter, you're lying on a horsehair mattress that's lumpy in all the wrong places. The sheets are cold and slightly damp from the morning fog that seeps through London's poorly insulated windows. You reach one arm out from under your woolen blanket and immediately regret it. The air feels like ice water against your skin. Your breath forms little clouds in the frigid bedroom. No central heating here, just the dying embers of last night's fire barely glowing in the small fireplace across the room. "Miss Eleanor, are you awake, miss?" The door creaks open, and your lady's maid, Martha, enters with a pitcher of lukewarm water. She's already been up for hours, hauling that water up 3 flights of stairs. "Your mother says today's the day, miss. The Chamberlain dinner party is tonight." And just like that, your stomach drops. Today is indeed the day. Your official introduction to London society. The first dinner party of many during your first season. The formal beginning of the Victorian marriage market. "Martha," you whisper, "I think I'm going to be sick." Now, miss. Every young lady feels that way. But your mama says you're ready, and ready you'll be. You're not sure if you want to cry or scream. Unlike your comfortable modern dating life where you might swipe right or meet someone at school, Victorian dating is basically a full contact sport with your reputation on the line. "Can you imagine?" Martha says as she pours the water into your wash basin. "Mr. Thornfield might be there tonight, the one your mamma says has 2,000 a year." She gives you a knowing look. See, that's the thing about Victorian courtship. It's never just about finding someone you like. It's about finding someone with the right income, the right family, the right everything. And everyone, absolutely everyone, will be watching your every move. Your mother has spent the past 3 years preparing you for this moment. Lessons in proper conversation, never too witty, never too dull. How to sit, stand, and walk. How to use cutlery in the correct order during a 12-course meal. How to dance without looking like you're enjoying it too much. How to show just enough ankle to be intriguing, but not so much you'd be considered fast. The survival stakes are real. One wrong move, one misplaced word, one improper glance, and your entire future could crumble. Your family's reputation along with it. Come now, miss, let's get you washed. Martha helps you out of bed, and the full weight of Victorian morning rituals begins. First, there's the washing with barely warm water in a small basin. Just your face and hands, mind you. Victorians weren't big on daily full-body bathing. You'd get a proper bath maybe once a week. I know your modern nose is wrinkling at the thought, but that was considered perfectly hygienic. Your mother wants you in the blue dress tonight, Martha says, laying out your undergarments. Says it brings out your eyes. In your head you're screaming, the blue one, with the whaleboned bodice that makes it impossible to breathe, but outwardly you just nod. Survival in Victorian society means accepting physical discomfort as your constant companion. Breakfast is a quiet affair. Your father hides behind his newspaper while your mother quizzes you on the names of every eligible bachelor likely to attend tonight's dinner. Now remember, Eleanor, the Chamberlain's second son is in trade, so don't encourage him, but their eldest has prospects, and the Darlington boy might be there. Poor conversation, but excellent family connections. Oh, and if Mr. Thornfield attends, mind you don't appear too eager. You take a small bite of toast, not tasting it. Your stomach is in knots. Unlike modern dating, where you might text someone, "Hey, wanna grab coffee?" Victorian courtship is an elaborate chess game where you're not allowed to touch the pieces directly. Everything must be done through proper channels, at the right time, with the right witnesses. And Eleanor, your mother adds, lowering her voice, remember that a lady never initiates conversation with a gentleman unless properly introduced, and never, ever remain alone with a gentleman even for a moment. Yes, mother, you say automatically. So, what? People just never got to be alone together, you're probably wondering. Honestly, that's kind of the point. Victorian courtship was designed to prevent exactly what most modern dating is about. Getting to know someone one-on-one. Instead, you'd meet potential partners in strictly controlled environments with family members hovering like well-dressed vultures. The morning drags into afternoon and suddenly it's time to prepare for the dinner party. This isn't a quick shower and outfit change. Oh no, this is a 4-hour production. Martha draws you a lukewarm bath scented with rose water. You soak just long enough to take the London chill from your bones. Then begins the elaborate process of dressing. First, the chemise, a simple cotton shift that's the only barrier between your skin and everything else. Then cotton drawers with an open seam. Yes, Victorian underwear had a completely open crotch. Makes using the chamber pot easier when you're wearing 17 layers. Next comes the corset. Hold up. Let me paint you a picture of this torture device. A Victorian corset isn't that cute little lace-up thing you see in lingerie stores. It's a heavy, steel-boned contraption designed to force your body into the fashionable silhouette. Tiny waist, pushed-up bosom, straight posture. Deep breath in. Miss, Martha warns before pulling the laces. You inhale as much as you can, gripping the bedpost for support. Martha pulls. The corset tightens like a boa constrictor, squeezing your ribs until they feel like they're touching your spine. Your lungs can only fill halfway now. Your lower ribs might actually bruise. Again, miss, we need to get you down another inch for the blue dress. Another pull, another notch tighter. By the time Martha's satisfied, you can only take shallow breaths from the very top of your lungs. Your waist is now unnaturally tiny, your posture forcibly erect. This is how you'll spend the next 8 hours. Makes swiping on apps while lying on your couch in pyjamas seem pretty appealing, right? But we're nowhere near done. Over the corset goes the crinoline, a cage-like structure made of steel hoops that will make your skirt bell out in that classic Victorian silhouette. It bounces as you walk, knocking against furniture and making it nearly impossible to pass through doorways without turning sideways. "Hold still, miss," Martha mutters, sliding petticoat after petticoat over the crinoline. Each layer adds weight. By the time she fastens the actual dress, the blue silk with its tight bodice and voluminous skirt, you're carrying an extra 15 pounds of fabric. Now for your hair. Martha sits you at the vanity and begins the painstaking process of arranging your locks. No quick ponytail here. Your hair is brushed, sectioned, curled with hot irons, pinned, and arranged in an elaborate style that shows both sophistication and maidenly modesty. The process takes nearly an hour. By the time you're deemed presentable, face lightly powdered, lips lightly rouged, but not too much or you'd be considered fast, hair arranged, dress fitted, gloves buttoned, small reticule prepared, you're exhausted. And the evening hasn't even begun. You look beautiful, Eleanor, your mother says when you descend the stairs. There's genuine pride in her voice, and for a moment you feel a flash of warmth. This is what she's prepared you for your entire life. Your father looks up from his pocket watch and smiles. "My girl's all grown up," he says, and you detect a hint of sadness. Once you enter society, once you find a match, you'll leave his protection for your husband's. That's the Victorian way. The carriage ride to the Chamberlain's home is silent, filled with nervous anticipation. You stare out the window at London's gas-lit streets, wondering which of the men you'll meet tonight might eventually become your husband, because that's the end goal here. Not dating for fun, not seeing where things go, but marriage, preferably by the end of the season. The Chamberlain's townhouse is ablaze with light when you arrive. Footmen in livery stand at attention as carriages deposit finely dressed guests at the entrance. Your father hands you down from the carriage, careful not to wrinkle your dress. "Remember, chin up," your mother whispers as you approach the door, "and for heaven's sake don't talk about those books you're always reading. Men don't want a blue stocking." You take a deep breath, as deep as your corset allows, and enter the lion's den. The Chamberlain's drawing room is crowded with London's finest society. The air is thick with perfume, cologne, and the subtle scent of money. Crystal chandeliers throw dancing light across silk gowns and jewelled hair ornaments. The gentle murmur of proper conversation is punctuated by occasional polite laughter, and everyone, absolutely everyone, is watching everyone else. Miss Hartwell, Mrs. Chamberlain greets you at the door. "How delightful you could come." The complicated dance begins immediately. Your mother expertly maneuvers you through the crowd, making strategic introductions. You curtsy, smile, speak when spoken to, laugh softly at appropriate jokes, all while scanning the room for potential suitors through lowered lashes. Direct eye contact? Absolutely not. That would be considered forward. Miss Hartwell, may I present Mr. James Thornfield? Your host introduces a tall, dark-haired gentleman who looks to be in his late 20s. This is the man your mother mentioned. £2,000 a year and excellent family connections. You curtsy. He bows. A pleasure. Miss Hartwell, he says, his voice pleasantly deep. The pleasure is mine, Mr. Thornfield, you respond, the practised words falling from your lips automatically. And that's it. That's the extent of your first interaction with a potential life partner. He moves on to the next introduction, and you're swept away to meet the next gentleman. This isn't like modern dating, where you might have a deep, hours-long conversation on your first meeting. Victorian introductions were brief, formal, and thoroughly supervised. You'd form your initial impression, and if interested, the gentleman would follow up by calling at your home, with your parents present, of course. Dinner is announced, and here comes another test. The seating arrangement is strictly determined by social rank. You're relieved when your host's son is assigned to escort you in, meaning you rank somewhere in the middle of the gathering. Not embarrassingly low, but not presumptively high either. The dining room takes your breath away, what little breath your corset allows. The table gleams with silver, crystal, and fine china. Multiple forks, spoons, and knives sit at each place setting, a minefield of potential etiquette disasters. You're seated between your escort and an older gentleman who, thankfully, seems content to focus on his food rather than conversation. Across from you sits Mr. Thornfield, who occasionally glances your way. In your head you're screaming, "This is how I die," by accidentally using the fish fork for meat or drinking from someone else's water glass. The first course arrives, clear soup. You carefully take your soup spoon, the correct one, thank God, and delicately sip from the side of the spoon, never the tip. One etiquette hurdle cleared, only 11 more courses to go. Do you enjoy music, Miss Hartwell? Mr. Thornfield asks suddenly from across the table. Every eye in the vicinity turns to you. This is a test. Say you love music too enthusiastically, and you might appear overeager. Dismiss it, and you seem uncultured. I appreciate fine music, Mr. Thornfield, you respond carefully, though I play only moderately well myself. He nods, seeming pleased with your answer. Perhaps you might play for us after dinner. Your stomach sinks. Playing for a room of critical strangers is another Victorian courtship ritual you've been dreading, but refusal isn't an option. If Mrs. Chamberlain wishes it, I would be honoured, you reply. Your mother, seated 4 places away, gives you an approving nod. You've navigated that exchange correctly. The meal progresses through course after elaborate course. Soup is followed by fish, then meat, then game, with palate cleansers and side dishes interspersed. Wine flows freely for the gentlemen, while ladies take only small sips. Becoming intoxicated would be a social disaster of the highest order. You're hyper-aware of every movement. Back straight, not that the corset gives you much choice. Elbows off the table, small bites, minimal chewing, no slurping, no reaching. Wait for each dish to be offered to you. Accept a little of everything, even if you dislike it. Never finish everything on your plate. That would suggest hunger or greed. Both unladylike. It's exhausting. Unlike your casual dinner date at a restaurant where you might order whatever you want and actually enjoy eating it, This Victorian dinner is an elaborate performance where food is merely a prop. By the 10th course, you're light-headed from the corset and the stress. But the night is far from over. After dinner, the ladies withdraw to the drawing room while the gentlemen remain for port and cigars. "You did well with Mr. Thornfield," your mother whispers as you sip tea in the drawing room. "He watched you throughout dinner." You feel a flutter of something, not quite excitement, not quite dread. Mr. Thornfield seemed pleasant enough, more interesting than the other gentlemen you've met. But is that enough to build a life upon? When the gentlemen rejoin the ladies half an hour later, Mrs. Chamberlain does indeed ask you to play the pianoforte. This is a standard Victorian courtship showcase, a chance to display your accomplishments while looking decorative. You sit at the instrument, arranging your skirts carefully, and begin to play a simple but pleasing melody. You're not particularly talented, but you've practiced enough to be competent. As you play, you're acutely aware of Mr. Thornfield standing nearby, turning pages for you. "You play with feeling, Miss Hartwell," he says quietly when you finish. "That's more important than technical perfection, I think." You glance up, surprised by his comment. That's not the standard compliment. "You're kind to say so, Mr. Thornfield," you respond, careful not to show too much pleasure at his words. "Not kind," he corrects gently, "merely honest. Do you enjoy reading as well as music?" Your mother's warning echoes in your mind, but something in his expression makes you answer truthfully. "Yes, very much." His eyes light up with genuine interest. "Then we must discuss books sometime, perhaps when I call on your family." And there it is, the first step in the Victorian courtship process. A gentleman asking permission to call on you at home. Your heart races, but outwardly you maintain perfect composure. "My parents welcome visitors on Tuesday afternoons," you say, the formal response coming automatically. He smiles, bows slightly, and moves away. The entire exchange took less than 2 minutes, but it's enough to set the courtship wheels in motion. By midnight, you're back home, exhausted but unable to sleep as Martha helps unlace your corset. The relief is immediate and almost painful as blood rushes back to compressed areas. "Well, miss, how was it?" Martha asks, helping you into your nightgown. You think about the evening, the stress, the discomfort, the constant awareness of being watched and judged. But then you remember Mr. Thornfield's comment about reading, the genuine interest in his eyes. It was, you search for the right word, a beginning. As you slide between the cold sheets of your bed, you realize that Victorian courtship is a marathon, not a sprint. Tonight was just the first of many carefully orchestrated social encounters that might eventually lead to marriage. You drift off to sleep wondering what Mr. Thornfield likes to read, and whether Tuesday is too far away. And as for you, lying in your comfortable modern bed with no corset in sight, be grateful that your dating disasters involve awkward text messages rather than social ruin. The Victorians somehow found love despite the rules, or perhaps because of them. The anticipation, the careful dance of approach and retreat, the thrill of a meaningful glance across a crowded room. There was magic there, even among the constraints. Sleep well, dreaming of a time when a turned fan or a carefully placed flower could speak volumes more than any dating profile ever could. Tuesday couldn't come fast enough. Eleanor spent the 3 days after the Chamberlain dinner in a state of nervous anticipation. Would Mr. Thornfield actually call? Had she imagined the interest in his eyes? Was her blue dress too forward? Not forward enough? The waiting game was a cornerstone of Victorian courtship, a far cry from today's instant text messages and dating apps. No, hey, I had fun last night messages. No checking if he was active on social media. Just silence and endless speculation. Your posture, Eleanor, Mother reminded her at breakfast Monday morning. A gentleman notices how a lady carries herself. Eleanor straightened her already straight spine, pushing her shoulders back. Even at home, the physical constraints of Victorian womanhood never relaxed. Your breath catches imagining being constantly aware of your posture, your facial expressions, your every movement being scrutinized. Not just on dates, all the time. Now, I've instructed Mrs. Wilson to prepare the good tea service tomorrow, her mother continued, spreading a thin layer of marmalade on her toast. And we'll have those small almond cakes. Nothing too elaborate. We don't want to appear as though we're trying to impress. The irony, of course, was that everything about Victorian courtship was designed to impress, while simultaneously pretending not to care. It was exhausting. Of course, Mr. Thornfield may not be the only caller, her mother added with calculated casualness. The Darlington boy seemed quite taken with you. Eleanor suppressed a grimace. Mr. Brait. Darlington had indeed stared at her throughout dinner, but had spoken exactly 3 words to her. Charmed, Miss Hartwell. Not exactly the foundation for lasting affection. Mother, Eleanor ventured carefully, do you think it proper to discuss books with Mr. Thornfield if he calls? He expressed an interest in literature. Her mother's eyes narrowed slightly. A passing comment, I'm sure. Gentlemen prefer to lead the conversation, Eleanor. A few modest opinions are acceptable, but remember, men don't marry women who challenge them intellectually. That night, lying in her bed, Eleanor stared at the ceiling and whispered to herself, what if I want someone who welcomes a challenge? In your cosy modern bed, you're probably thinking, just be yourself, girl. But in Victorian England, being yourself was rarely an option, if yourself didn't conform to very specific standards. Tuesday morning dawned bright and clear, a rarity in London. Eleanor was up before Martha arrived, too nervous to sleep. The formal at-home hours for morning calls were between 3 and 5 in the afternoon, but preparation began much earlier. The house was in an uproar. Maids polished silver tea services, dusted ornaments, and arranged fresh flowers in the drawing room. The cook prepared delicate cakes and biscuits. Even Eleanor's father was banished to his club for the afternoon. Morning calls were strictly women's affairs. Your Green Day dress, I think, her mother decided after breakfast, with the modest lace collar, fashionable but not too showy. Martha helped Eleanor dress with particular care. The green dress was mercifully lighter than her dinner gown, though still layered over a corset and petticoats. Her hair was arranged simply but elegantly, with a few loose curls framing her face, the Victorian version of I woke up like this. You look lovely, miss, Martha said, stepping back to admire her work. Not too eager, but pretty enough to catch any gentleman's eye. That was the perpetual balance, being attractive without seeming to try, interested without being forward, accomplished without being threatening. Modern dating has its complications, but at least you can text, I had fun last night without risking social ruin. By 2 o'clock, Eleanor sat in the drawing room with her mother, ostensibly working on embroidery while her stomach twisted with nerves. The embroidery hoop provided something to do with her hands, but more importantly, It was an acceptable activity that could be quickly set aside when visitors arrived. "Remember to keep conversation light," her mother reminded her for the 10th time. "The weather, music, perhaps art if the gentleman seems cultured. Nothing controversial.